everybody. Well, welcome to Shepherd's Corner. And no, I'm not your shepherd. I am Deacon Darek Walcott, and it is truly an honor to welcome our true shepherd, which is Archbishop Jason Gordon. And tonight we are having our first Shepherd's Corner with our new Archbishop. So we want to welcome you. Welcome, Archbishop Jason.
Thank you very much, Deacon Darek.
Well, I'm sitting in your chair, but not really your chair.
Okay.
But
I thought this was my chair because my house is behind me.
I think so. I was, it is such a wonderful time, as we begin our new year to welcome our new Archbishop. And so I really want to focus in, Archbishop Jason, on your New Year's message. I was there, I listened to it, and it was interesting that your New Year's message dealt with taking the path to peace. As we begin the new year, it's all about peace.
Well, the church celebrates World Day for Peace on January the 1st.
Yes.
So January 1st is Mary, Mother of God, but it's also World Day for Peace. And every year the Holy Father would write a message for peace for January the 1st to help us to think and to reflect about peace and what are we doing about peace. And I suppose it's a great thing at the beginning of the year to start thinking about peace so that hopefully during the whole year we would do things towards building peace in our society. And so that's why I focus on peace for the beginning of the year, because it's a great tradition within the Catholic Church.
Now, it's interesting that you talked about a pilgrimage. Now, everybody knows that a pilgrimage is a spiritual journey. So when you said it's, we're talking about a pilgrimage to peace, it started my mind thinking. And there were a number of points that you brought up on this journey, on this spiritual journey to peace.
So before you go to the points, I want to pick up that notion of pilgrimage.
Yes.
You see, many people think that you're either peaceful or you're not peaceful, or you're unpeaceful. But the truth is, peace is built up day by day. Peace is not a destination. It is actually the result of a journey. It is actually a whole pilgrimage in itself. Like you go to the Holy Land, you leave behind something and you're heading towards something else. And you have this sense of movement from one thing to the next. And when we're thinking about peace, I want you to think pilgrimage, because I want you to think you're going to leave something behind, you're moving to something else. And it is that leaving behind and moving to something else that really captivates this understanding of peace within the Catholic Church. That peace is not a thing, is not something that you get, but it is something that we journey towards by building the right conditions.
Now you talk about leaving something behind, and this just kicks off on one of your first points, one of the first steps on this pilgrimage, which is forgiveness. And we're dealing with forgiveness and leaving things behind. Now, when you talked about forgiveness, on this pilgrimage, I said, my goodness. And you just said leaving things behind. That's a big challenge for a lot of people.
Yes, because we like to hold on to devil bundles. We tie up the devil bundle, we put it on our back, and we tote it mile after mile in our pilgrimage of life. And then we find we don't have energy, we find we lack luster, we find this, we find that. But what we're not realizing is the reason why we're feeling the way we're feeling is because we're weighing ourselves down with all of these big, big weights. Pope John Paul II has said that if you want peace, you can't have peace without forgiveness. And you can't have forgiveness without justice. And so we start with peace and forgiveness because my lack of forgiveness to you is bringing violence into the world. And my lack of forgiveness to anyone is contributing to the hatred, the violence, and all of that distortion inside of the world. And so for me, forgiveness is so important. We don't even understand the psychological benefit of forgiving,
Father.
When we forgive, is not the other person who gets the benefit,
Yeah.
We get a psychological benefit, your blood pressure starts to drop.
Yeah.
You start to feel like a better person. You feel like a whole weight lifted off of you. You can interact with things differently because forgiveness and unforgiveness is really one of the heart of what Jesus came to teach us. He came to teach us how to forgive. When we did not deserve it, God forgave us. That's God's mercy.
But that's the hardest thing. To me, you stepped off your first point, your first step on this path to peace, to me was the hardest thing, to forgive. Because, you know, as human beings, pride is something that kicks in. We hold on to it because we know the pain. So therefore, that's what we know, you know, and it's so difficult for human beings to forgive. Yet you were talking about the benefits of forgiving, that we are actually benefiting us to forgive.
Yes.
But pride is something that kicks in. You know, we just see that person, our blood, in terms of Trinidad's terms, our blood doesn't take the person after they hurt us. How do we get on that first step?
You know, there's some wonderful stories of forgiveness. Huh? There's a woman in South Africa in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where the commission was based on everybody seeing what the truth is. She had lost both her husband and her son in the apartheid times. And the policeman who was confessing had killed both her husband and her son. Both, eh? And he was saying, this is how your husband died. And it was graphic. Wow. It was brutal. It was really inhumane. This is how your son died. And it was graphic, it was brutal, it was inhumane. And at the end of the man confessing and saying clearly what had happened, the woman was asked, do you want to say anything? And she said, yes, I have something I would like to say. She said, you know, I still have so much love left in me, and I now have no one else to share it with.
Wow.
Sonny, I want you to come to my home once a month so that I could cook a meal for you and I could share my love with you.
Well, you know.
Now, Derek.
That's kind of hard, Archbishop G.
Derek, yes. If this good woman who has experienced all of this has come to the place where she has forgiven, and not just forgiven and be stranger, but forgiven and choose to demonstrate love, I don't know that you or I or anybody I have met has experienced anything that bad from anybody.
Well, you know, how do we then, you know, work that out when you have a society that is experiencing so much violence? You have a society where we have gangs fighting against each other, where you have even victims of crimes, you know, and that woman experienced the same kind of violence.
She's a victim of crimes.
Yeah.
A crime against her husband and a crime against her son. Her choice was to forgive. That was her choice. Now, is it easy? No, it's not easy. But here's what I'd like to recommend to people. If there is someone that you have unforgiveness with, find a stone, a nice size stone, not too big, but not too small. Take that stone in your hand and walk around with that stone every single day. Hold it in your hand for periods and pass your pain onto that stone until the moment when you are ready to release both the pain and the stone. And when you're ready to do that, ritually release it. Throw it into the water, put it somewhere in a garden, bury it in a garden bed, put it somewhere, but then release it. And then, while you're doing that, keep praying to God for the grace of forgiveness.
Okay.
Keep praying for the grace. Pass the pain into the stone and pray for the grace of forgiveness every single day until you know you've come to the place of forgiving. And then you can let it go. Then you can move to the next stage. And then do something tangible to say to the other person that you choose peace. You choose to forgive. You choose to let go. And you choose to move on.
Now, you all are listening in on this beautiful interview with Archbishop Jason. I know that there are some people outside there challenged by this same first step. How can I forgive? Because sometimes, you know, the closest people to us hurt us the most. And sometimes those are the hardest people to forgive. Now, Archbishop J just said we have to pray for it. you know, and I think that that is, you know, it's a pilgrimage. So in itself, it reminds us that only spiritually can we do it. Because if we don't look at it spiritually, I think it will be, you know, very, very difficult.
Agreed. No, I changed my mind. I disagree with you.
You disagree with me?
I completely disagree with you.
Give it to me.
It will not be difficult, Derek. It will be impossible. If we don't ask God for grace, because us human beings, forgiveness doesn't come naturally. Self-preservation is what comes naturally. Yeah. What kicks in is our reptilian brain that shuts all of our higher rational thinking off, and all of a sudden we in fight or flight mode, and next thing you know, we in a whole fracas that we didn't even understand what's happening. That's how our brain works in defense of ourselves. You know what Gandhi said? He said, you know, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will leave a half-blind, toothless world.
No, but we're talking about forgiveness. We were hearing people and all the murders, and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago talks about capital punishment.
Correct.
But yet, the church says no to capital punishment.
Correct.
And therefore, that struggle, even with Catholics, even with Christians, saying, but the law says.
Correct.
You know, but the church says something else.
Correct.
You know, how then do they reconcile the two?
The highest law of the church is mercy.
Amen.
The highest law of the church is mercy. Because the one law Jesus has given to us is love one another as I have loved you. And the as I have loved you is giving himself completely to us. Jesus has so many parables of forgiveness. Consider the one when he says the man who owed the master 10,000 talents. That's like about a couple $1 million. Yeah. And the master, he begged the master forgive him. He gone outside. The fellow owe him a little $5,000, and he threw the man in jail with his whole family, and on and on and on. Now, that is a metaphor of the level between what God is forgiving us and what we are forgiving each other.
Right, right.
Because the amount of money that was being forgiven in the first instance was like hundreds of days of wages.
Right.
It is millions of dollars. Yeah. So it's an amount of money that nobody who is a worker could ever afford to forgive, to raise, to have, to forgive, to be able to pay back. It's an impossible debt to pay back. And that's the debt to God. The debt on the human level is a very possible debt to pay. If you're diligent, if you work hard, it's very possible to pay. And so the parable is saying that there are two different levels. The level on the part of God is such a high debt that the level on this human is such a low debt. Why are we choosing not to forgive this little bit of debt when we have been forgiven this incredible debt that we can never repay? That's the question that Jesus poses to us. And that's the heart of the Christian message.
Now, we don't want to be easy on the new Archbishop. So if you all want to call in and discuss this first step, which is forgiveness, please, the lines are open. Because I'm going to take him to the next step. Because he just talked about mercy and forgiveness. Now we're going to talk about justice. Because with forgiveness, you have to have some sort of justice in this whole thing. And I know you want to talk about justice and justice in society and justice how we treat each other and so on. But what there must, in forgiveness, you know, they must balance it with justice. With mercy, there's also justice. And you talk about justice while doing forgiveness work. Let us look really honestly at ourselves and ask if there are areas of injustice in which we participate. So I want to kick that off. Do we participate in areas of injustice?
Well, that's the question, Derek. So remember Pope John Paul said, no peace without justice, no justice without forgiveness.
That's right.
So forgiveness is the tail end to come back to the justice. The justice is the key to unlock the peace. So we're making this pilgrimage is all to peace. Huh?
Yeah.
So, you know, we think about injustice, and that's what big people do. You know, if you don't give an honest day's work, You know that's injustice, huh?
Well, the whole of Trinidad in trouble. I just letting you know. The whole of Trinidad in trouble. What it is you just said here? If you
don't give an honest day's work, that is injustice. You are robbing your employer of money.
Listen.
That's injustice.
Archbishop J, I just came out of a public office at 3 o'clock and nobody was there. And they're supposed to work till 4.
Well, that's injustice.
Yeah.
And when I say if you don't give an honest day's work, I don't mean if you don't turn up in the office and stay in the office until the time you're supposed to check out. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually when somebody come to the the counter and your job is to serve them, that you actually go and say, hi, welcome, how can I help you? I'm talking about doing the job that you're being paid to do. And the reverse is also true. If you're not paying your employee an honest day's work, for an honest day's work, then that's injustice also. So injustice is rampant on all parts of our society. If you take a pencil from your workplace, that's an injustice, huh?
I was told so.
So
and a pen, and a writing pad.
You mean you don't believe me?
And you take it home for your child, doing SCA.
You mean you don't believe me, eh? It sounds no, Darek, it sounds like you're not believing me. If you take
one pencil?
Listen, if they have 100 employees in the place,
yes.
How much a pencil costs? Let's say it costs $5.
Yeah, $3.70.
$3.
Yeah.
One employee take a pencil. You have 100 employees. Everyone take a pencil once a month.
Yeah.
How much that is in a year?
No, that's too much money.
That's plenty
more than
money.
my salary.
There's 100 times 12. That's 1,200. That is about $4,000 or $5,000.
Right.
That's injustice.
Yeah.
That's injustice. The pencil isn't there for your child to do SCA.
Right.
The pencil is there for use in the office. So that's injustice.
So what are you trying to say? I mean, I think you stayed in Barbados a little too long here. 3 trainees. We might arrive at work 10 minutes past 8 if we are supposed to be there for 8 o'clock. But then we have to go and buy doubles. So we put on our handbag, we put on, our umbrella. We go around the corner, we buy the doubles. We might eat 2 there and then come back and eat 1. And then we get ready, maybe around 8:30, 8:45 to start working.
And that's after we go and tell the neighbor working next to
Or
us.
we might be on Facebook or WhatsApp. Listen, WhatsApp and Facebook, I mean, in the middle, sometimes you go into our office and all of a sudden as you come to the counter, they'll drop the screen. They'll close the screen that would be on our Facebook. You know what I mean? What you're saying in terms of justice, or part of what you're saying about justice and doing justice, is also saying, listen, I have a time to work and a time to play.
Correct.
And therefore, this is my time to work for honest days.
Correct.
Pay.
Correct. You see, the human being is primarily a worker.
Yeah.
Only human beings can work. And when we are not working to our fullest capacity, we are not becoming the best version of ourselves. When we're not doing the work we're supposed to do, the first injustice is to ourselves, and to our friends and family, because we are becoming a diminished human being. We're not becoming the best we can be. When I'm not becoming the best I can be, I am doing an injustice to you. You have a right to meet the best version of me. I have a right to meet the best version of you. And when I'm chinksing, you see, I wasn't in Barbados too long. When I'm chinksing on my development and my growth, then what I am doing is an injustice to you. Is an injustice, because you have a right to expect and to meet the best version of me.
All right, let me join the unions now, right? Because the unions are also going to say, listen, you employers have to pay a fair wage.
And I agree. And if the employer is not paying a fair wage, that's an injustice. And the reason why it's an injustice, because the family that this employee is supporting cannot become the best version of itself, because it is being robbed and denied true justice and equity in the workplace.
But who's to say what is a fair wage?
Well, the church has a principle about the fair. You thought you was catching me with that one. it must be able to, diligent people working must be able to support a family, must be able to secure their family in terms of nutrition, in terms of clothing, in terms of shelter, in terms of all these things. So there are some criteria for what a fair wage is. And that's why every society has a minimal wage. And that's the level below which somebody will be in poverty, in absolute poverty. So we set a minimum wage. And then what's the fair wage for a particular type of work? Then that's dependent on a whole range of things within society. But you know, there are companies that go about doing audits to find out what different people are to be paid in different sectors. So, I mean, I know that in the church, that's what I rely upon. I would ask for an audit that looks at, say, a secretary in the commercial sector and in the NGO sector and in the church sector. And I would compare those three, and then we would decide as an organization where we want to pin it, and because it's always a range, and then we put a range of where we pin it. So we might say we will pin it at 80%, or we might pin it at 90%, depending on how we can afford or not afford. So a fair wage is a very important thing.
Now, we talked about working and
We
ensuring
talked about
that
justice.
but working and ensuring that we do a fair day's work for
Correct.
the we looked at the employer side, but I also saw and listened to your message that you also spoke about violence, and violence is also injustice.
Correct, it is an injustice. If a husband or a wife is being violent to a spouse, that's an injustice, because we have a right to expect peace in our home. We have a right to be treated fairly and to be treated with dignity. And if I'm treating you with violence, then I am going against your right. You have a right to be treated properly. That's a right that you have, just because you are a human being. And no one has the authority to be violent to another person. And so our violence, and when I talk about violence, I'm not just talking about physical, you know. I talk about
what other violence they have?
What about the hate speech? What about the hate speech that we do? What about the racial violence that we... What about the gender violence when we talk about people of the other gender in derogatory terms, as if them is scum of the earth and as if them somehow is lower than the gender that I belong to? And I have heard it on both sides of that gender divider. I've heard it on both sides. What about the class violence when we treat people of another class as if they are not even human beings, and we refuse even to acknowledge that they exist? Well, that's a form of violence.
But I heard you speak about also visiting the Beatum. And one of the things that stood out for me was when it was Sealots.
Yeah.
And one of the things that stood out for me is one of the people there told you, listen, if we apply for a job,
Yes.
and they hear we are from Sealots, we don't get the job.
Correct.
Now, I just want to say, I have been in the presence of people who thought like that. When I say that, I'm talking about senior employers
Yeah.
in very large firms, and they say, if I get an application from somebody in Sealots, and I get the same application from somebody in, let's say, Westmoreland, right? And both of them have the same resumes in terms of qualifications, experience, and so on. I choose any person from Westmoreland, even though the person from Sealots may have maybe a little one-up on them in terms of education.
And you know what? And they probably will be more hungry for the job and do a better job.
Who's that?
The person from Sealots.
Well, I agree with that.
You know,
But that is a serious challenge, because
When
they
I
say,
was
I
in-
am going to choose somebody from Sealots. Them is criminals.
when I was parish
I'm not saying
priest,
so, yeah? Right.
when I was parish priest of Rosary and Gonzales,
Right.
you know how much young people had their address as 14 Park Street?
You mean
Rosary Church.
Rosary Church?
One pile of them had their address as 14 Park Street.
Isn't that sad for society?
Of course it is sad for... And I'll tell you what is the saddest part of that. Nazareth. Could anything good come from Nazareth?
True. Yeah.
The same prejudice that they had against Jesus is the same prejudice and stigma that we have against these communities. And you know, I have met the most amazing people in communities like Sealots and Beetham and Gonzales, St. Babs, Lavantil. I have met the most amazing people. I could tell you stories after stories. I'll tell you one story. Christmas Day, okay? Christmas Day. I brought a hamper for a family that I knew. And I was late in the hamper because the whole week was crazy. And Christmas Day, I said, you know something? I'm going and deliver it this day. When I reached the family, tears run out of this woman's eye. She said, oh God, God sometimes don't come, but he send. He said, Father, you have no idea, but I had nothing to give these children today. And I hear sweating how I could have a Christmas Day and not give my children a little something. Man, you know, you are God sent, and on and on. The next thing she did, she said, go and call auntie, go and call uncle. They had three families in this compound. Auntie and uncle come, and she take that parcel and she divide it in three.
Wow.
There and then. Yeah. She could have taken the whole thing, gone inside and closed her mouth. Yeah. But I felt like a sent Sheba in the sun. Yeah. Because as generous as I thought I was, yeah, that is generosity. When you give out of what you don't have, yeah, that's generosity. Now, that level of generosity is a characteristic of being truly human. And that is to me humanity at its absolute best. And yet we will say the community, no. I have met people in communities like this who have been real decent human beings.
Now, you've been watching, you know, the Shepherd's Corner. We spoke about, you know, forgiveness. We're speaking about justice now. And we want you to call in, you know, we want you to speak to Archbishop Jason, you know, tell him what you're thinking, especially on those two topics in terms of justice, do justice, and forgiveness. But I want to give you one thing here, Archbishop J. What about me? I'm an employer. You know what I mean? I want to benefit from the fruits of my enterprise. You know, I want to be able to afford to jump in a plane and go Miami every single week, every couple months, buy this and buy that.
Like you ain't working properly yourself. No, we had to check your work ethic.
You know, how then, you know, do you tell, you know, even conglomerate owners like this, listen, you know, just look at yourself. Look at the person in the mirror and, you know, how about that person, you know, who can't even afford to feed their families? I mean, to me, that is in itself an injustice. If yes, I overdo it, you know, yes, I must benefit from my labor, but
not. So there are two principles I would say here. Pope John Paul said, all private property has a social mortgage.
Say that again.
All private property has a social mortgage. You know, your house has a fiscal mortgage to the bank.
Right.
If you don't pay that mortgage, what happens?
They take it.
Well, your private property also has a social mortgage, which means that the first lien on your house is everyone in Trinidad and Tobago who doesn't have what they need to live a decent life. They have a lien on your house.
And you put that under justice?
And if you don't pay the social mortgage,
yeah,
then we'll have an eruption in society.
But we're seeing it.
Of course we're seeing it.
We're seeing the inequity.
Of course
and therefore,
we're seeing it.
Because of that inequity, and it seems to be an international inequity.
Correct.
Where we have, you know, a certain class, or I don't want to go by the percentage sides, right? But you have certain people who live unbelievable lives.
Let me tell you the international figures. The richest 1% own more than the 99% that come after them.
Wow.
You hearing it?
1%.
The richest 1% own more, have more than the 99% that come in after them. Now something has to be wrong.
Yeah.
Something has to be wrong. When 1% can own more than the 99% after that.
What is our challenge to that 1%?
Our challenge to that 1% is be generous. If you look at a Bill Gates, a Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, these people have understood the role of privilege. And they have put their incredible wealth yes, at the disposition of the development of nations, of peoples, of projects, of all kinds of things.
I see somebody is calling in. Hi, this is Shepherd's Corner, and you are with Archbishop Jason Gordon.
Hi, good night, Bishop Jason, and good night,
Deacon Darek.
Deacon Darek. How are you?
Doing
Blessed.
really well.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, same to you.
You know, you talk about people that go to work and they don't work. And this, I have it in my mind and head for so many years. They go to work, they ask for a job, and they don't do their job properly. And I always said to myself, the Bible said the sins of the parents follow the children. Now, I think that if you have a job and you go to work, you work 8 hours a day to get your pay. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people at work, they don't thank God for their boss that give them the job. Yes, we know the boss have his ways, but the fact of the matter, you are there to pray for him to change. That's what I believe. I don't know about anybody else, but I believe that through him, I have a bread to put in my children's mouth. Through God and through him, I have a bread to put in my children's mouth. So I have to pray and I tell God, thank you for the job. Thank your boss, and at least every day you say a prayer for him. But we have people here in Trinidad, and I have to say most of us, that we tell ourselves everything we do is right, and there is no wrong. Today, when you look at the life of people and their children, I don't think they make their children know this is wrong, and that is right. You hear? It is in me to talk about that all the time. People, they are very unforgiving, even to their parish priests. They go to church and they change the priest. I don't like that priest, so they don't come to church. What is happening to us? I don't know. People are getting very, very unforgiving. They are not charitable anymore. Some of us are not kind. And I as a person, I am trying to change that to myself.
That's good.
I am trying to pray for the children, the young men and women in prison. I'm trying to pray for all the homes that have young men that going through their state of life, to pray for them. And
Very good.
I used to think of them as being evil. Now I don't think that anymore. I think I have to pray for them. These children need prayers. The people in the area need prayers. I live at Simeon Road, and when I'm praying, my brain move around the place thinking about these children that need.
Well, that's a very good thing that you are praying for the children and praying for the employers and the employees. Yeah. Because when we meet that kind of attitude, when we meet that kind of don't care-ish kind of attitude or disengage, we need to do several things. And the first thing we do is, yes, we pray for people and we ask God's mercy for them. Yeah. But then if we know them, we also give a word of counsel. And say, this is not the way we should do it. And here's why we don't do it this way. And then, you give good example and you show them by your example how it could and should be done. And that way you are now contributing to building a better culture. How does that sound?
Yeah, well, right now I am helping a mother with 7 children, and I'm not patting myself on the back for that. I'm praising God that He would help me more financially so that I could help them.
Good,
more.
Very good.
And trying to be kind. I grew up thinking that, I don't like this one, my blood don't take this one, and now remembering it sounds so stupid, and it feels so
excellent.
Awful.
You see, we have a convert here.
Wonderful.
We have a convert. Thank you, sister.
Sister, thank you so much for calling in and for calling in, to Shepherd's Corner. We really appreciate your contribution. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Now, I want to talk about the third point that you spoke about.
So forgiveness.
You talk about
justice.
Forgiveness, do justice. Now, commit to non-violence. If it's one place, I really want us to look a lot at is committing to non-violence.
Now, you think the forgiveness is hard or the non-violence is hard? Which one?
Boy, I think if you can't forgive, there's going to be violence.
Good. So, and that's why I started with the forgiveness.
Yes.
I went to the justice. Now I'm going to non-violence. Why commit to non-violence? Well, what is non-violence? Non-violence is having a peaceful attitude, an attitude of reconciliation, of respect and dignity towards people, towards the environment, towards the country, towards everything. The roots of nonviolence go back to Jesus. In his passion, if he wanted to, he could have been very violent to everybody,
Yeah.
2 calls to an angel, and everybody get licked up.
Right.
And Pilate, Herod, the Jews, everybody will find out exactly what o'clock it is.
And he actually told Peter, put away your sword.
He told Peter, put away your sword.
Right.
So the roots of nonviolence and nonviolent thinking goes right back to Jesus. Who made it really popular in our time would be Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
That Gandhi started with this philosophy of satyagraha, which is the radical nonviolence, but not as a passive thing. Nonviolence is active. Because it's a building of peace. So because I'm nonviolent doesn't mean that I'm going to allow things in society to continue as they are.
So you can be non-violent and still protest against
Correct. Be
injustice.
an activist.
Right. Okay.
You can be an activist non-violent or non-violent activist.
We have to tell somebody unions that. But I think there is another call, so we'd like to take this other call. Good evening.
Good evening, Your Grace. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. It
Thank
was
you
nice
so much.
seeing you there. And your installation was absolutely fabulous. I
Thank
would
you.
not have missed it for the world. Congratulations. Anyway, I came in late. I forgot it was Thursday. It was my sister-in-law's birthday. And when I remembered, I just got the end of what you had said. Apparently, Deacon said you spoke about forgiveness.
Oh, yes.
That forgiveness is a topic that I always pray about. Unforgiveness. What I've noticed, Your Grace, is that it tends to run in a family tree. Like some people find it so hard to forgive, and it goes right down. So I keep praying about that all the time. So I thank you. And my uncle once told me that there were unforgiveness retreats in the States.
There
I
were.
don't know if we had one in Trinidad, or are we having one sometime? Okay, I'd listen to you. Bye and all the best.
God bless. What I could tell you, you could do, if you go to YouTube, to Catholic BB, which is the Barbados YouTube channel, and scroll down, you'll find there a retreat I did for Lent on forgiveness. 5 nights, 5 talks, forgiveness. It goes through the whole thing. So I would propose, go and look at that. That will help you to understand the process of forgiveness.
Committing to non-violence. Now, I think that violence is something that is learned. Violence
Yes.
is something, and sometimes we see it right in the homes. And if we don't parent our children properly, and if we exhibit violence in the home, then that's what they're going to be learning. And I see somebody else is calling in. So before we kick off, would you like to talk just briefly about violence in the home?
The way that we
Yeah.
do pecan
Right.
with children in home is violence.
Picong?
Yes.
But that's a Trinidad thing.
I know, but when a child is struggling with a body image and say, hey, fatty,
Yeah.
and you're making the child feel ashamed,
Right.
that's a form of violence. Let's take the caller.
Good evening.
Good evening, Your Grace.
Good evening.
Good evening, and a happy new year and a healthy new year to you.
Thank you so much.
You were talking about injustice. Every office that you work in, every office that we go to, people practice injustice because they're supposed to work 8 hours. They come in, they have to go and talk here, they go and have breakfast. They never think of sitting down and doing the people's work. How can we get people to understand that you have a 24-hour day? You have 8 hours in which you can sleep. Nobody sleeps consecutively for 8 hours. You have 8 hours which you can play. Nobody can play 8 hours. You have 8 hours where you are paid to do a job. How can we get our people to understand that this is what we are supposed to do? How can we get him to do it? Could you help me, please?
She's asking for a miracle, you know. But I believe in miracles.
You believe in miracles?
The indiscipline in our society is one of the reasons why the violence and the moral slide has happened, because of the indiscipline. So what she's talking about, which you were saying, I think you all were working in the same office, is really crude indiscipline. And it's come down to, because I can get away with it, I will. So, in other words, unless the employer acts like massa, I am going to do what I want to do and not give him or her their justice. And it is really one of the sad parts of the Caribbean psyche.
It is.
And it's also a wound that cries out from our Caribbean soul.
Right.
That unless the employer acts like massa, you are going to do what you're going to do and not work, not give service, etc., etc. Now, I say that on one hand. And on the other hand, I have met Trinidadians of all races, all classes, all groups of people who have been incredibly committed to professionalism, to dedication, to service, to going the extra mile, to helping you beyond what you ask. And I have met people young and old who are like that in this country. So it's not as if it is a particular race or class or gender or any of our stereotypes. But it is that there is a sizable or a section of our society that are really fundamentally indisciplined. And it is that indiscipline why many of our schools are failing. Now, when your job is to teach and you are indisciplined in your teaching and therefore your children don't learn and therefore your children don't pass common entrance and therefore they don't get into a good school and therefore their life chances have been hurt. Now that is a form of injustice that's crying out to heaven. Because your indiscipline has changed the life chances of a child in this country. And rather than achieving their full potential, that child will be less than their full potential because of your indiscipline.
But you know, that whole thing of education to me is ringing out loudly, because a lot of people are saying, how then do we make this change? Mm-hmm. And therefore education seems to be something that we need to look at maybe in another show.
Yes.
You know, we need to talk about that, because we're dealing here with committing to non-violence, right? At home, in the office,
in the school, in the church, in the workplace, in everywhere.
How we speak to people.
How we speak to people, how we conduct ourselves, how we engage in talk about other people, how we greet people, all of that we have to do. Because nonviolence is basically holding deep human dignity for everyone and deep respect for everyone else. That I respect you as a human being, and I know that you are a child of God, created in his image and likeness, and there I treat you in a particular way. Or as the golden rule, which spans all religions, says, right. do unto others as you would have them, do unto you.
But you know, some people don't like themselves, you know. And they don't treat themselves very good. I mean, you know.
That is also true. Eh?
So there's a big challenge there too.
That is also true.
But that is a golden rule. Do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you.
Correct.
You know, and I think if we can follow that golden rule, we'll be fine. There's somebody else calling us. Good evening.
Welcome, caller.
Good evening, sir. Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Right. I figure that the churches have been adding a lot to the indiscipline. I remember 2 years ago, a lady or a man could not teach if she is unmarried and has a child. Now, these days, that is not a problem. You understand? So the indiscipline started there. And if we could get rid of fornication and adultery and homosexuality, and we will go a very long way. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for calling. Thank you for giving us your perspective, you know. But committing to nonviolence also means, and talking about forgiveness and justice also means that we have to also look at that perspective in terms of what you were saying. If I got you correctly,
I wasn't
one of
hearing
the
it
things,
clearly.
yeah, we weren't hearing you too clearly, but I did hear some of the things that you were saying in terms of, you know, homosexuality, in terms of fornication, in terms of even teachers coming into the workplace and, you know, maybe I got you right, not being married, but then you're allowing them to teach. But, you know, we really can't judge. And that's also a real important part of this whole thing. We really don't know the circumstances. And therefore, that's also part of justice.
Correct.
That's also part of justice. But going down to, you know, helping the poor was also another step. Now, we can't knock off all of these things because, you know, committing to nonviolence, to me, is such a powerful step.
But I'd like people to go to nonviolencett.org.
Go to nonviolencett.org, as our shepherd said, and you'll get an idea in terms of the background teaching of nonviolence and what we would like to think about as a society committed to nonviolence. Because,
and you know, this is a show by itself, but keep going.
That's a show by itself because we're looking at nonviolence also in terms of the environment.
Correct.
Right now we are seeing landslips, we are seeing floods because we are violent against nature itself.
Against the environment.
Yeah. Now, help of the poor, we want to talk about helping the poor, which is also a step and a path, you know, to peace. Yeah. But we have another call, Archbishop Jason. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Welcome.
Congratulations, Your Grace, and your appointment, well deserved. It's all God's work. But I want to comment on the fact that this taking the path of peace. I remember Sister Julie recently saying, education is the key.
Yes.
And what you have done, as you rightly said just now, cuts across all religions, because the essence is peace.
Yes.
Now, I was thinking we could introduce this into our schools. Now, especially our secondary schools where you have the adolescent group, and there's something, if I remember, I'm a retired teacher, that there's a homerooms time on the timetable for teachers period, and we can use this, especially in our Catholic schools, in an essence of a program where we educate the children, and you have quite valid points and points that they are accurate with. We just need to flesh it out and encourage them to live what this gives us here. It's a blueprint. So if we can do this, maybe we can extend it to the government schools, because it cuts across. It's a message. We want the message of peace. And if we can inculcate this in our young ones, then they go home to their families, hopefully, and would reflect on what they have done in school, and the families now would become involved. You see, this program is not a talk shop. It needs to be put into action. And if each one of us takes the responsibility, especially the teachers in our schools, they are the ones also who need workshops to work on a program like this. So if we educate our teachers now have that responsibility, and they're full of fuel, they can discharge their responsibility in the way that would lift our young people. We are searching all over, but education is the key. And I can't remember what Sister Julie said. She quoted from somebody who said talked about education. So Your Grace, congratulations on this wonderful New Year's message. And I hope that the Ministry of Education, especially Garcia, he's a Roman Catholic, would take hold of it and do something with it. All God's blessings for continued good health. And to the Deacon there, the same. My sentiments are the same. God bless you all, and continue the good work.
God bless.
Thank you so much.
We have to do education for nonviolence in our schools.
Yeah.
But let's go to the next point, because that's a big one too.
Poor.
Don't
How do we help
the poor?
the poor?
You can't have peace in a society if we are not bringing development to the poor. if the poor are being marginalized and the rich are getting richer and richer, which is what is happening, then you're going to have an eruption because it reaches a point where it's unsustainable. And so, from a very pragmatic perspective, if you want to have peace in your society, remember all private property has a social mortgage?
I got you.
If you want to have peace in your society, you have to help the poor. And not just by giving alms,
Right.
which is basic frontline giving. You have to teach a man to fish, serve all. But you have to give housing, St. Vincent de Paul. You have to help people to move from where they are to being self-sustainable, development, the pilgrimage. Helping the poor is an essential ingredient in the pilgrimage to peace. Because without that, what happens is we have this society of unequals, and that is the greatest condition for violence in a society.
Yeah, but the challenge is, in terms of helping the poor, is letting the rich understand that balance that must happen.
Correct.
Because if they don't,
Correct.
they can't build high enough walls, they can't have enough
Enough
security
security.
cameras, and so on.
Correct.
So how do we educate then? And the word educate seems to be coming all the way through. You know,
That's it.
even in terms of helping the poor, it
Correct.
means helping everyone understand
Yes.
their social responsibility.
Correct.
And that is, and I see we have another call.
But we still have one more point.
And we still have one more point because
Go
we have to
ahead.
deal with the refugees.
That's right. Go
Right?
ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening, Your Grace. Just
Good evening.
to say all the blessings. I am happy that you are Archbishop, and you know I was voted for you since when you were in Barbados. I say, oh God, Gordon have to come, and the Pope did it for us. Okay.
Thank
all
you.
the very best for the new year, and all Dexter, I think. Is Dexter the other one?
Deacon
Yes,
Darek.
Deacon Darek Walcott.
Derek, yes. Derek too. I always admire him. So please enjoy the rest of the year, and you know what I mean. All the blessings which you have, and I am so happy for you. Okay, thank you.
Thank
and
you
have a great
so
night.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The measure of a great nation is how we assist the poor. Your words, not mine.
Correct. Why? Because a foolish nation is a nation where the poor gets left behind and the rich get richer and richer and richer. Go back to education. Our best teachers are in our best communities.
So, what
Okay.
happens?
So the communities that need the best teachers don't get them. So the best schools are not in the communities that need an equalizing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so just go to that. Or any other, or not hiring somebody because they belong to a particular community. And we could continue going along. Unless we all make a commitment to develop every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago to their fullest potential, we are not going to be the country that God intends us to be. And we will not be the church that God intends us to be. That has to be our commitment as church.
And that is also Pope Francis's message
Correct,
throughout
correct.
his whole life as the Pope. Now,
You
I
know,
want to go to refugees, you know,
But
because
before
that's a big thing,
I
you know.
know. But before that, when I was down in St. Vincent de Paul
All right, okay.
during the week, one fella gave me a piece of advice. He said, "No, Archbishop, let me tell you something. Eh? He says, you know, when people want power, they use their heart to get power. But when they get the power, it's go to their head. Come, let's go to refugees now."
Now, refugees, you know, welcome, protect, promote, and integrate the migrant and the refugees, the asylum seekers.
Yes.
This is a big challenge.
Of
You know,
course it is a
we have no
challenge.
problem sending money there, but we don't want them in our country.
And the problem is on a number of levels. First, these are the really other. These are the strangers. Second, we don't understand the language. They come from a different language, a different culture. Third, we already have enough people looking for work in this country. Why are we going to be giving work to these people who come from another country? Next, these people, they're running away from something. are we sure they're not criminals and they're not going to do us a set of harm? So we have a lot of prejudices against the refugee. But I want to put something before you, Deacon Derek. The Holy Family was a refugee family.
I understand that.
The Holy Family was a refugee family. And therefore, every time you meet a refugee family, you could well be meeting the Holy Family.
Right.
And therefore, we have to treat them like the Holy Family.
But we have so many challenges. I mean, even though we've signed on to the United Nations Charter, yet these families come to our country, they're in need of shelter, they're in need of asylum, and they're here and we're processing them. But who is picking up the tab when sometimes these people themselves would like to work? How do you balance that? Because, you know, they're here, they have skills, they would like to work, but the government says we can't hire them.
Well, and that's a real challenge of, here's the words: welcome, protect, promote, and integrate the migrant and refugee. We have to integrate them. We have to find a way to bring them in and to really make them feel welcome here. We have 2,000 refugees in this country.
That we know of.
Actually, no, we know of more.
But that's what I mean.
That's the ones that are pending.
Right.
We have others that have been settled before.
All
so
right.
yes, but we have, as church, we have to open our hearts. We have to welcome, protect, promote, and integrate the refugees. But I see you have to do a wrap-up, though.
This show has gone by so fast. He wasn't even too sure we could make it last 60 minutes, but we've gone to the 60 minutes. I want to thank you all so much for welcoming our new Archbishop. I want to thank you for, you know, calling in, making your suggestions. This is just the his first of many, and we want to pray and ask Almighty God to give him the strength and the grace for his grace, so that he could be here with us to shepherd us as our new shepherd. You know, we're going to be back on again, you know, every Thursday, Shepherd's Corner, you know, so please, you know, just tell your family, tell your friends that we're here. Thank you so much for calling in and making this show a success that it is. God bless you and have a happy new year. Any last words, Your Grace?
Yes. Let us all make the pilgrimage to peace. Because no matter where you are along that continuum or along that pilgrimage, we have more journey to walk. And you know, I'm a guy that has walked a long pilgrimage last year.
Yes.
Or the year before, 780 kilometers. Let us make the long pilgrimage to peace. 2018, let this be the year when peace breaks out in our land.
Amen. Just to remind you on some points, this pilgrimage to peace, we begin with forgiveness, do justice, commit to non-violence, help the poor, welcome, protect, promote, and integrate the migrant and refugee. God bless you. This is the Shepherd's Corner. Deacon Darek and His Grace, Archbishop Jason Gordon, saying good night and Happy New Year.
God bless.